Good morning. I am so excited to be with you all on this morning and excited to present to you our special guest. Many of you heard him at our opening on yesterday. I'm delighted to introduce to you my favorite poet and author, Dr. Jaiya. Dr. Jaiya is a freedom worker, a social psychologist, a former professor at Howard University. He also is the host of his own podcast, and he does incredible work for children, especially children who have been disconnected from family and community. In essence, he is a healer. And so we want to warm up the space for his presence. And so I invite you to place one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, inhaling in through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth. And if we can simply say, let the healing begin. Let the healing begin. Dr. Jaiya, give him a warm welcome.
Morning grace, morning glory. How are we, people? How are we, family? Are you with me this morning? Are you with me? Maybe you don't speak English. Estamos conmigo. ¿Cómo está, familia? ¿Todo bien? Anybody? I'll speak Guten Tag. I'm just going to keep going down the list until you start responding. Ni hao, ni si te hao ma. Namaste, namaskar. How are you, sincerely, from my heart? Are we good? Do you have permission to speak? Remember yesterday we went through this whole thing, right? Do I have to do it again? Okay, culturally, family, we're going to do this like the Black church. That means that if you feel something, express yourself. This is how you give your offering to this gathering. You are not here as a baby bird helpless in a nest to be fed by mama bird. I am not a mama bird, as you can see. And so we are here in collaboration, in communion, to be with each other. We have a sacred fire in the center of our circle, and we tend the fire by pouring our emotion, our heart, our soul, and our spirit into the fire. This is our kindling that keeps the flame strong, reaching for the sky. We do not sit in stillness, in silence, with repressed emotion and kinetic energy. We let it free. This is cultural introduction that I'm sharing with you. So do you join me? Are you going to move from the intellect down into the house of the heart and soul this morning? Or do you need some more caffeine? Is there coffee nearby? So here we're going. We're going to move. This is clearly not a PowerPoint presentation, if you haven't figured it out yet. This is heart and soul, revival, revelation. So I say to you, morning grace, morning glory. My name is Jaiya. I'm grateful to be with you. I'm grateful to be alive. When I say that, I'm speaking from a personal context in which we've had several family members pass away, change to light this year, maybe 5 or 6. And so in a season of our familial grieving, there is that divine gift that comes to us in which we tend to cherish this life even more. We cherish one another even more. As our loved ones change to light, somehow we are bestowed or reminded of the preciousness of all of this. And so I've come to you from my own personal journey this morning to share with you love, to share with you that I cherish that you can even be well enough to be here. I'm glad that you made it here. I'm grateful. If you were expecting a cognitive, intellectual, academic exercise, you will be disappointed. Because I have come to love you and to feed you. I have come to storytell with you. We need to talk about how we are, do we not? We need to talk about how we are. As academics and practitioners, as those who serve, as those with a tilt or tendency toward helping others, you and I are vulnerable to this pandemic dynamic of self-neglect, are we not? We identify as being the healers. And within that identity, we often lose sight of the fact that we are a tender sprout, just as tender as we were when we were a child, and the world was so large and we were so small. And so we're going to take this brief flicker of time together to nurture ourselves, to remember ourselves. This is going to be a story of remembrance. I'm going to work from a phone. Is that all right? Like my daughter and her generation do. I'm going to work from a phone. I'm going to bring us from wherever we were before this moment into a meditative place so that we can open ourselves and really receive what this moment has to offer for us. This is from my book, Legendary, which is a tribute to those who honorably serve devalued children and young people. How many of you serve children and youth? Show of hands. Let me ask that question a different way and see if my definition helps you to feel more included. How many of you here have young people in your life in any kind of way that you love and care about, for whom you wish well-being, healing, beauty, and the fulfillment of their soul and dreams? Show of hands. Okay. And so in the book Legendary, we are celebrating you for this role that you have in their lives. This is just really an incantation, and it is called jasmine tea. So don't expect anything fancy. I'm just reciting some words, and I hope and pray you will let them enter you. Are you ready? Deep breath from here, belly, not tight from the chest. Belly full, let your back feel the breath come into you, the air come into you, the blessing of life and oxygen. And here we go, jasmine tea, bubble baths, essential oils, candlelight, prayer, meditation, walks in the wilderness, cups of silence, laughter to the point of tears, liberated crying, sacred dancing, soulful singing, gardening, making love, making music, poetry, passion, baking, breathing, exercise, sleeping, resting, dreaming, creating, cleaning, journaling, learning, teaching, guiding, listening, healing, mobilizing, solitude, quietude, surrender, remember, release, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, sacred tobacco, our four teachers, sweat lodge, sunbath, swim, explore, discover, cherish, affirm, care, compassion, love, ecstasy, tremble, gasp, glow, glory, grace, ground, tearfulness, dilation, epiphany, nirvana, euphoria, solace, solitude, sunrise, sunset, dawn, daring, mess, mystery, majesty, mystic, drumming, humming, moaning, melting, awe, aura, pause, flow, touch, cradle, nurse, suckle, wean, wander, wonder, womb, soaking, floating, flying, flame, seeing, pulsing, kissing, thrilling, night, now, nectar, summit, sigh, mist, break, birth, bold, beautiful, subtle, privacy, intimacy, treasure, chocolate, water, spice, succulence, serenity, more jasmine tea, whatever it takes. Stay in your ceremonies, stay rooted in your wellness, hold your peace. Thank you. Polite golf clap, golf clap, golf clap. This is such a morning crowd. This is such a morning crowd. I am a living, breathing artifact of my people, the Kru people of Liberia, the Balanta people of Guinea-Bissau, the Mende people of Sierra Leone, the Blackfeet people of these lands, the Cherokee of these lands. I am artifact of my ancestors. I say artifact because my people, through me, they make art. And that's a fact. So I am an artifact of love that came before me just as you are. Your people, through you, they make art. You are the art, and that's a fact. Artifact. Thank you. Show Jake some love. These people are beautiful. These people that are making all this happen. And this is streaming out to so many souls, and they're allowing that to be fruitful as well. So we need to appreciate every soul who's a part of this. And so I am an artifact of these people. I was born in La Tierra del Encanto, Nuevo Mexico, abajo de las montañas Sandías, cerca del Rio Grande. I was born by the river. Not in a little tent, but you know what I meant. I was born in the land of enchantment in a place called New Mexico, at the foot of the Sandia Mountains. And when the sun falls down through the sky, it casts a color like watermelon on the mountainside, and that's why the mountains are called Sandia, Spanish for watermelon. And I was born at the feet of those mountains, and I was born next to a river named the Rio Grande River, in the high desert of Albuquerque, La Ciudad. And I grew and was raised in the desert and in the mountains. I share my story with you so that you have cultural context. I come from a black woman, my mother Mary, rest her soul, Mary Elizabeth Woods. And she was raised in a small town called Baghdad in the panhandle of Florida. Well, she was born there. She was actually raised in Birmingham. And when she came upon this time in our country's history, when our people were being hunted like slaves and had German Shepherd police dogs sicked on them, she decided she would take her two boys, my older brothers, Alan and Arnold, and flee as refugees to a place called New Mexico so that her two boys would have a chance to live and be treated as human beings. This is how my mother from the South ended up in the desert. And I come from a father. He was born and raised in a place in the woods in Florida called Bethlehem. And so my mother, Mary, and my father from Bethlehem, who was drafted into this army and sent to Vietnam and shot in a helicopter mission and brought back to the base in Albuquerque, grace and providence brought them together long enough to bring this soul through. This is cultural context. When we do not give honor and name to that from which we are drawing, we appropriate, we erase, we steal. This is why yesterday I tried my best through poetry to express that this thing we call psychology is not a modern science began by men of a cultural narrowness from a place called Europe who came over in the 40s and 50s. When we tell this story to ourselves about the birth of psychology, what we do is we erase, deny, diminish, denounce, and dehumanize all the human beings from around the world who were practicing this art that we practice today. And when we do this, we cheat ourselves of the full totality of the cultural richness of what we've come to call psychology. And when we do this, what we do is we encase ourselves in a soul-draining, spirit-killing, uninspired way of doing this healing work. And so what we are doing in this gathering, this 3 days, led by an inspired soul, is that we are reclaiming the heritage of who we are, you and I, as students of this psychology, of practitioners of this psychology, as researchers of this psychology. We are reclaiming, actually, you and I, the indigenous ancestry and root and origin, the epicenter. We call it the Hopi people in New Mexico, the Sipapu, the womb, the place of emergence. We are reclaiming this for ourselves so that we can feed and drink from this holiness of being healers, of being medicine. If we tell the story in a way that cuts out these essential truths of how our healing work began, we impoverish ourselves. And our families and communities that we serve, they suffer the brunt of that. You and I suffer that. We suffer the brunt in forms known as burnout, fatigue, compassion fatigue, distress, depression, stress, anxiety, disillusionment. How many of you have experienced that in your journey in this servitude? Show your hand bravely if you have experienced any of these conditions. Now we are speaking more broadly than just the label of psychology, because I want each of you to feel that this is a story about you. And if you don't identify with the word psychology, maybe you identify with the word social servant, or just servant, or just a soul wandering the earth trying to figure yourself out. If you live on this planet and you care about our existence, then this is your story. What I was trying to express yesterday through poetry is that I have spent many years wandering the desert that we call professionalism. And clients will have me come in and they'll say, Jaiya, our people are struggling. And they're not even talking about the community, they're talking about the practitioners, the professionals, the leaders. They're saying our staff is struggling, our leadership is struggling, our managers, our supervisors, they're struggling, they're stressed. Can you come in and help us, help us? And I always am grateful for the call, and I always also wonder, do they even know what the ailment is? And are they prepared to receive what I bring? Because I'm not bringing a PowerPoint presentation or regression analysis or chi-square fit. I'm not bringing those things. Those things have their own value and utility, but I'm not singing that song. I can shuffle that for you, but I am not called to be here for that. And so I go into these spaces year after year after year, and I sit with the practitioners, the professionals. And it's like walking into a morgue, especially when the meetings take place in system spaces. You feel me? County system spaces, state system spaces, federal system spaces. I'm talking about the buildings now. I'm talking about the physical environment where you walk in and all of a sudden you show up maybe to work each day and you're jamming your favorite music in your car, you're alive, you're feeling good. You had that cup of coffee or tea and your ride in was a good one and you're just feeling good, and you walk into the building and it's whoop, your energy just drops, it dies. Maybe it's the fluorescent lighting. Maybe it's the uninspired color of the walls. Maybe it's a lack of windows and natural sunlight, right? Maybe it's the condition of your kinfolk that you work with. Maybe it's all of this. So I want to tell the story about Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore 2. Now, Winnie the Pooh is what we could call an upbeat, positive, optimistic, sprightly fellow, yeah? Winnie the Pooh he's one of those Every time you see Winnie, he's always smiling, he's always grinning, he's always doing great, right? And for some of you, based upon your condition, that might be annoying. You might resent Winnie, I don't know. But Winnie, this is Winnie being Winnie. And Winnie loves for other people to be happy and joyful and to be well. He wants them to dance and sing. This is just Winnie being Winnie. It's just Winnie being Winnie. So he rolls up on his boy Eeyore, and Winnie being Winnie, he's like, Eeyore, how you doing today? And the sky is blue and the sun is shining and the birds are singing and the world is beautiful. And Eeyore's inevitable response is, I don't know. This is Eeyore. Now we can't be malicious about Eeyore. We need compassion and mercy and grace and empathy, because after all, Eeyore has a tail that's nailed to his butt by a rusted nail, right? It's like Eeyore might be in chronic pain for all we know. He could be addicted to opioids. We have no idea. Like, that part of the story's never been told, but Eeyore is not okay. Eeyore is not okay. And so I'm telling you a story about Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore too, but whose story am I really telling you? How many of you began your careers like Winnie the Pooh? You came straight out of college or graduate school. You had your, I got my degree. I'm gonna help people. I'm gonna be a clinician. I'm gonna be a counselor. I'm gonna be in the schools. I'm gonna help family. I'm gonna be an LMFT, whatever. I'm gonna help people. I'm so excited. And you showed up with your degree and your certificate and your credits and your grades and your scores, and you had this identity of being a psychologist, a social worker, a social servant, a helper. You showed up at the office first day as Winnie the Pooh, and you stepped into that environment and you were greeted by a whole tribe of Eeyores. And they were looking at you like, girl, why are you smiling so much? We don't do that around here. Why are you so positive all the time? And all of a sudden, your whole barometer of joy just joop, 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 joop. Within days, hours, weeks, months, you went from being Winnie the Pooh to becoming Eeyore too. You got caught up in all of the malaise and the toxicity, the negativity, the exhaustion, operating from parts of us that aren't meant to sustain us when we exclusively live in those places. Not even the frontal lobes, but the lizard brain. How many of you have had that journey from Winnie the Pooh to Eeyore too? Be brave, admit it. And maybe it was just temporary, but for some of you, maybe you stayed as Eeyore. How many of us? This is a pandemic. I'm testifying now. I'm not theorizing. This is who I have sat with for these, 25 years, all over our country. Little towns, big cities, all kind of systems. And so when I come to you, you may have read in the program, Jaiya John's going to be talking about rehumanizing and indigenizing psychology. That sounds interesting. And your intellectual brain is like, I think I'll attend that. I want to learn about indigenizing, rehumanizing. You did not know what you were getting yourself into. Because I'm coming from all of those moments where I sat with you, I'm talking about your kin, maybe even some of you, and you were broken and you were hurting, and I was grieving with you. And I've been praying for you all my life, because we're not okay. Who are we to talk about psychology as though we are the well ones and the people we serve are the ones in need? This is an unfortunate angle to take. We need, my family, humility. We need to be able to say, I too am broken and tired and weary, and I'm terrified and doubtful, and my faith flags sometimes. And sometimes I feel like a motherless child a long way from home. When I was born in the desert, I was orphan born in the desert. I was born homeless, hopeless, helpless, nameless, graceless, tasteless, faceless. When my mother birthed me, they took her. from her body, took me from her body, and rushed me out of the room so quickly that she did not know whether she had given birth to a boy or a girl. So we did not, my mother and I, have that sacred moment, that maternal moment, that precious one-time fleeting moment where the mother brings the child to the nook of her tree. And the chemistry in the skin of the mother dances with the chemistry in the skin of the newborn baby. This is science now. If those of you who have trouble with non-scientific ways of being and affirming and validating anything that is not scientifically proven by statistical analysis, this is proven in your peer-reviewed journals. There's a chemistry that happens only at birth, and it shows up in the skin of the mother, and it shows up in the skin of the newborn. And the mother instinctively brings the baby here or here. She doesn't put the baby on her knee. She doesn't put the baby on her elbow. She brings the baby here. It unleashes a cascade of chemistry that travels to the brain of the newborn and calms the child. But more importantly, the chemistry travels to the brain of the mother, and it's a messenger saying to the mother's body, gestation and birth is done. A new child has come. Go get the drum. And at this point, the milk releases and comes into the body of the mother, gathers in the breast, and the suckling begins. My mother and I did not have that opportunity. There was immediate displacement. My question is not so much how does that affect the baby. My question is how does that affect the mother? I think about this in this moment because you and I need to position ourselves as the mother. We are those who give birth to something in this gestational work we do as healers. We must question each day and in each moment, what is it that I am gestating? What has been conceived in me? If it is my calling that has been conceived in me, how do I gestate that? And then at the point of birth, can I recognize that birth has happened? Because if I don't recognize that birth has happened, I will not bring that which I have born to the special place in my being so that the milk can come. In our case, the nectar of your inspiration, of your soul, of your aspiration, of your reclamation, not just of you, but all your generations too. If you do not recognize the opportunity before you on your journey of being a professional, you miss out the divine, supernatural powers that you bring to work. They've been gathering in you by virtue of your life journey and experiences. Your story matters in your work too. Are you with me? Are you feeling this? This is you. You came to APA 2023 around the way in DC, formerly Chocolate City, before gentrification hit hard. And he said, oh man, I'm at a professional convention. We're gonna do professional things. But no, you have a leader who has had the opportunity to conceive and gestate and give birth to and recognize the ceremony of all that in her own journey. And so that she visioned for you long ago what this gathering would be. And that is why you have been experiencing dance and drum and song and hum and rhythm and romance and poetry and ancestry, and you have been experiencing the lesson of our 4 teachers, 4 preachers, and 4 reachers, our 4 seasons, 4 directions, our 4 corrections. This 3 days is an offering from life to you and from you to life. You've been educated, or we like to say you've been edumacated. Okay, you've got your edumacation. Relax. That's not the end of your journey or your story, it's the beginning. It's not even the beginning because the beginning was you just growing up in all of this. I'm asking you from a place of love, how okay are you really? Because I struggle often This year has been heavy-hearted. These recent years have brought many pains. I have moments where I really wrestle these aspects of myself, the soul, the spirit, the body, the being, the identity, the name, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit that is in us and all around us. I struggle, with reconciling all these aspects of myself because my heart hurts sometimes. And sometimes I say, Lord, how come me here? I wished I never was born. I'm being honest with you. I'm being vulnerable with you. The titles and degrees do not matter when you are confronted with suffering and pain, your own or that of others. And so if we do not ask the question about why does it matter that we decolonize psychology? Why does it matter that we rehumanize psychology, that we indigenize psychology? If you're wondering those things, if you're clinging to a status quo, a historical oppression and caste system that says psychology began as this one thing in the 40s and 50s and it's always going to need to be that one thing, or it's not psychology, it's a fraudulent thing. If you're clinging to that, then maybe you resent the notion as you come to DC that we are to rehumanize, indigenize, and decolonize psychology. But you see, I speak to you as the child who was displaced at birth. I speak to you as the child who was left on the river, in the reeds. I speak to you as the child who was raised in isolation from his own. I speak to you as the child who had to go on a journey from self-hatred and self-destruction and muteness, the self-oppressiveness that I came up with creatively as a way to deal with my pain and the way that the world related to me. I speak to you as that child. I speak to you as the child who needed somebody to be well enough to care for me and relate to me as a human being. I speak to you as that, not as a professor, not as an instructor, not as a PowerPoint symphony conductor. I speak to you as the child who prayed for you. I prayed for you, an angel to come from somewhere and just be well enough to see me, feel me, hear me. Feel me? I'm speaking to you as that child, as that family, as that community. And you are those people. I pray you can recognize that. Break down these segregationist, siloing fences and walls that you are conditioned culturally to have as part of your identity that says that you are this thing and then there's these people over here. That's not indigenous of you. Let's define indigeneity. Because I don't think we do often enough, and so a lot of people these days are wondering, what does it even mean to be indigenous? Do I qualify? If this is the question you're asking, let me do my best. In some ways, maybe you are not indigenous in terms of your condition, but in terms of your heritage, what you come from, I beseech you to contemplate more deeply your ancestry. And maybe your ancestry, your relationship with your ancestors needs some work. I've observed that in certain folks of certain cultures. They'll say, I don't feel I have a culture. I don't have ancestors. My ancestors did bad things. Breathe. You come from imperfect human beings. We all do. And your people have done great harm. And your people have done great good. And this is the story of all of us. The question is, how disconnected are you from your people? Because something should be feeding you each and every day. I call it a spirit of love. It comes from them, that's always alive. It should be feeding you and repairing you and nurturing you. It should be that from which you suckle. Maybe you've never been taught to suckle from your own nectar, manna. Maybe you were raised culturally to just think of yourself as an individual who pulls yourself up by your own bootstraps, the American mythology of hyper-individualism. that makes you very uncomfortable with concepts of communalism, in which we work together and we look out for each other. In the midst of my wandering in the desert in the territory of New Mexico, I was raised with the Hopi people, with the Apache people, with the Diné people, the Navajo people. I was raised with the Acoma people, the Sky people. I was raised with the Tasuki people, the San Felipe Pueblo people. I was raised with the Santa Maria Pueblo people. I was raised by the reservation and the Pueblos. I was raised by indigeneity before I would even have an opportunity to reconnect and reunion with my people. And one of the things I want to share with you is a story about what it means to be indigenous. In New Mexico, in the Pueblos, there's something called the feast day. And because of colonialism, the feast day nowadays tends to happen according to a Catholic calendar, a Catholic religious calendar. But in the past, the feast day, a spiritual ceremony and celebration that took place for many days, it would happen according to the moon cycles and the sun cycles and the harvest cycles. And in New Mexico, as a child, I grew up and I got to experience these feast days. And what would happen on feast day is that all the people in the Pueblo would gather. It was a sea of humanity, and they would move from home to home. Now, a Pueblo, which is essentially a reservation, if you've ever been there, have any of you been to a Pueblo? Show of hands. Oh, look at you. Y'all exposed and whatnot. Y'all get out. Is anybody here from New Mexico? One sister, just you and I. We represent today. We represent today. More power. So in a Pueblo, all of the people move from home to home. It's a ritual. It's a ceremony. Now, they surround the home like a sea of humanity, and then they enter into the home. These are humble homes, humble people with not much material wealth, okay? The kind of communities that this country judges harshly as inferior. But in the Pueblo, you will find enlightened degrees of spiritual well-being and relational and social well-being. Dare I say, psychological well-being. And it plays out this way. The family that lives in the home around which and within which the community has gathered, they gather everything that they have. The community comes and sits around the long table to be fed, and the family's in the kitchen and they're cooking and preparing whatever they have: beans, tortillas, ensalada, corn, maíz, pozole, chile, whatever they have, and they serve it. And shift after shift of the community eats, and it's like eats. This is Thanksgiving times 1,000. And the family keeps saying to the people, eat plenty, eat plenty, eat plenty. This is an invocation. It's a love connotation. It's saying, we love you, you are us, and we are you, and so take, please, what we have. We are feeding you, which we're feeding ourselves. You must allow us to feed ourselves by feeding you. Eat plenty. And the people are stuffed, and in the next shift, they sit down and they are fed. And the people then move to the outside of the house, and the family gathers on the rooftop of the house, and they throw down to the people all of their belongings, their perishable food items, their canned goods, their clothing. All generations of the family are on the roof, and they're throwing down to their people, the community. And you may ask, from a hyper-individualistic psychological perspective, well, why would you do that if you're already materially impoverished? You might even be feeling some sort of anxiety as I tell you this story, because you're thinking, oh my God, we can never do that. My family, we can't afford to just give away. We gotta gather more. We need to hoard more. We need to keep more. What is the psychology of a people who would give away what they have? If you look at it mathematically, there is this truth. As the community moves from home to home, each family knows this, that while they may be giving away all their food on the long table and all their belongings from the rooftop, they will then join the same crowd and move from home to home within the Pueblo. And they will be given to by every home in the Pueblo. So mathematically, if you figure this out in your brain, They are giving away one time from their one home, but the rest of the day they are receiving from all the homes. And they end up with more than they began with. Do you follow me? This is indigeneity. This is being in a relational way where relationship is primacy. Capitalistic, materialistic, conquest-oriented, status-oriented, identity and power-oriented, manipulation and extraction-oriented behavior and mentalities are not accepted under the banner of indigeneity. You are an indigenous soul when you exist as an indigenous soul. Claim your birthright. Join the feast day. Join the feast day. I'm looking at the clock. I do want to allow for a brief Q&A, so let me transition, people, if I may. I think of indigeneity and the need for us to rehumanize psychology as sort of a teeter-totter between remembrance and kinship. If we in this work can really learn to practice the consideration of the contemplation of our kinship with those we serve and with each other, this moves us in the direction of not only indigeneity, but rehumanizing ourselves. We have a reckoning. We must reckon with the harms that have been done, not just as an association or a profession or a field, but the harms that have been done as a society. When you are indigenous, you open yourself to this reckoning. You don't flee it. You don't grow defensive. You see it as an opportunity for collective healing. Kinship allows us the full access to all of our powers. Remembrance, remembering our journey, our history, our ancestry, all the good and bad. Remembrance allows us to access all the medicine we need for healing. Kinship and remembrance bring us to indigeneity. An indigenous condition allows us to work on decolonizing psychology, or decolonizing really any aspect of your life. Now, Dr. Jennifer Moulin is going to break that down in some beautiful ways later this morning. I just wanted to plant some seeds in you that hopefully help you to feel better inside, as simple as that this morning, and carry with you a more open heart and soul as you go forward into your day. I do want to allow for you to have the opportunity to express your heart as we end, but let me share this with you. This is another love letter, just like yesterday. Dear soul servant, sacred warrior, healer, teacher, compassionate one. This is all of us speaking to you. If you work in good faith to serve the tender land of childhood and a humanhood, then you, my friend, stand at the center of this ceremony, and we shall call you human. And if you hold in your heart a sacred place, purified with sweet grass and cedar that ill spirit cannot touch, then you, my sister, brother, lover, are one of the carriers of the light. If a fire burns in you, to see suffering cease, if you cry tears of love at the sight of beauty, if you can feel in the silence between these words, the dream song, the earth medicine, the sky vision, the water dance, the ancestral drum, that is our human journey. A journey that is weaving as a warm blanket of sweet grass against the cold, then you, my kin, sit around an ancient fire, even if you have forgotten the warmth of its touch. This is a fire that depends on us gathering soulful wood, so that it may continue burning and our circle may go unbroken. And family, you should know this. We, the ones who swim where the water is deep, bow down to the grace, your grace, and we lift up our eyes to your glory, and we celebrate your servitude. Your sweet breath is the morning dew and the mountain mist, giving suffering souls hope that somewhere in this world someone cares, and that a new day will dawn in the end. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you so much. This was nourishing and healing. And the question I want to ask on behalf of all of us is, you started off talking about your personal and your family's grief. And when we spoke on yesterday, we talked about the idea that some people don't know how to grieve. And so from an indigenous perspective, whether for ourselves or those that we serve, how do we grieve?
How do we grieve? Thema with the big question, the existential question. How do we grieve? Thank you for that invitation. Let me share with you what comes to me. We grieve, again, remember I spoke to you of remembrance. We grieve by remembering that everything is grieving with us. Everything is always grieving. The trees right now are grieving. Out where I live in California, the Joshua trees are dying in the heat. The saguaro giant cactus are dying, the cacti are dying in Arizona's heat. Wildfires are burning through the land. The water down by my family in Florida, the ocean water is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The coral is grieving, the living things are grieving. Your brothers and sisters are grieving. I think if we begin to redefine grieving as an aspect of the aspiration of life, the natural breath, the in-breath and the out-breath of life, maybe we would grow more comfortable with our own grieving and self-permit that flower to blossom. If we think of grieving as a negative thing, as a tragic thing, then we're of course going to neurologically and emotionally disassociate from grieving. We live in a society that is very unfriendly and hostile toward grieving. If you have a loved one die, maybe at work they give you a day and a half off. You have to take what is it called? Personal time? Something, you have to sacrifice something bureaucratically in order to take time to grieve. So just to keep in mind that we live in a society that is hostile to grieving and discouraging of grieving. How do we grieve? We grieve by breathing, by remembering our natural design, by making sure that we are open to, immersed in, and in communion with the spiritual forces of our life, by creator and creation. If we disconnect that plug because we say, I'm a scientist, I'm a social scientist, I'm a trained psychologist, well, good for us, but then we will suffer. And we suffer. We suffer. You and I suffer by degrees of disassociation from our spiritual, social, ancestral, cultural truth and nature. We grieve by remembering. We grieve by celebrating, by dancing, by storytelling. We grieve by gathering sweet memories of our loved ones who've changed to light. We grieve by recognizing that we are dying in many ways and every day. Our identities are dying, and it's a beautiful thing. In order for us to be born into our new version of self in this August, in this September, in this 2023, 2024, we have to live through many deaths. I think we grieve by just being courageous enough to revisit our definition of grief and grieving.
Thank you so much. And I know after this session, you have a meet and greet in the hall, and also will have your books available, but I'm mindful of those who are joining us who are streaming. And so because you have a beautiful buffet of books, could you recommend one or two for those who won't be here physically to receive them that you think would be particularly impactful for those in the field?
Thank you. That's a beautiful alliteration. Beautiful buffet of books. Bountiful buffet of beautiful books. I don't know. It's strange for me to recommend something to someone I do not know, but I will say this. This book is it just was born yesterday, Dear Artist. So that's the newest one. I will say that there was one book that didn't make it here. It was displaced by UPS, bless their hearts. And it's called Your Caring Heart. And it's for professionals like you. And it's really about your well-being, and it's medicine for you. And so that's another book that's relevant for the profession. Daughter, Drink This Water was one.
My favorite book.
So that sold out yesterday in a hurry. That's the most popular book, and that's just a love song. It's written in the voice of an ancient soul who's speaking to girls and women, but also speaking to all of us as living things. It's a sacred voice. It's a poetic voice. It's written really as a book of inspiration, of affirmation, of proverbs, of faith. So that's another one, Daughter, Drink This Water. They are all on the website, jaiyajohn.com.
Excellent.
And I do share medicine words on Instagram every day, so that's another place to find the medicine Did that answer your question?
It sure does. And in our last 18 seconds, or you want to, yeah, I have to
Mama Cecilia.
leeway to Mama, but you'll have to go to the microphone for those who are online, and it has to be very brief.
Okay, Mama C.
You all give a big hand for my mother, Reverend Cecilia Bryant.
From my tradition, it is prophetic that the healers have gathered at the same hour that the nation is in a place of conspicuous grieving. What must the healers do to heal the soul of this nation?
Thank you. Thank you. What must the healers do? Bless our elder, Reverend Cecilia. You spoke it. We have gathered. I am big on gathering. The longer I live, the more I've realized that what has been taken from you and I is our gathering practice, habit, ceremony, tradition. They've taken our language, they've taken our gathering spaces. Those who would uphold the caste system and perpetuate the suffering. And what happens when we don't gather is that we forget who we are. And so in my truest Mufasa voice, I say,
Remember.
we must gather and remember who we are.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Jaiya John. And he will be available in the hallway to meet and greet and sign for each of you.
Sign and hug and selfie and all that. Come see me.